morning, everybody in Texas and everywhere else that you can see me. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, as Mr. Rogers would say. And it's one of those days where the morning started off with um, being thankful. And they said, and it's something that I'm sure a lot of people go through understanding or not understanding, and the kind of religious person you are, or are you a religious person or not. And I don't remember if I mentioned this the last time, but love your neighbor. But how do you love your neighbor? In order to love your neighbor, you love yourself first. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And when you think about that, sometimes I wonder if people really know how to love themselves. Because when you look at the things where if you set up a needs list, what is the first thing that most people put on their needs list? And now this is not one of the mornings that you hear me talk about here in Texas, because it's an unusual morning. Number one, it's cold. It's not cold. It's not cold like Detroit, Michigan, but it's cold. But I think about the things Mama would say to me. It's, I'm here. I can experience the cold. I know whether it is cold or whether it is hot. And in the event that it is more cold than I can stand, I am able to access heat someplace in my house. And if I happen to be fortunate enough, I don't have to turn the heat on. All I have to do is get a blanket. And if I'm fortunate enough, I have one blanket or two or three or more blankets. And again, I get back to the most fortunate part of my life is I had someone to define these kinds of things for me. And it started when Mama would say, we did not have any money, but we were never poor. And she went on to define that a little bit further. We never went to bed hungry. We never went to bed cold. And we always had someone to tell us it was going to be all right. And when you look at a list of what you want, what you need, and with what you have, I had it all, because as Mama said, didn't have any money, but we were never poor. And then my son grew up and he met his cousins and aunts and uncles. And I mentioned before I was the 14th of 15. And Mama, we didn't have any money, but we were never poor, because we had everything that we needed. We didn't go to bed hungry, and we didn't go to bed cold, and we always had somebody tell us it's going to be all right. And At Mass this morning, the priest mentioned loving your neighbor as you love yourself. And the thing is, a lot of times people are always telling you that you're selfish when you love yourself and what have you. But if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else? How are you going to do the things that you need to do, that you are able to do, that makes you able to help your neighbor? And you look at, again, that part that makes me think I was the luckiest person or the richest person in the world, because I had it all. I have never, ever in my whole life, and I'm adding up to 89, I have never been hungry. I have never been cold. And I wonder, as I look at some of my neighbors or some of my friends, my acquaintances, or colleagues, or whatever you call them, and they talk about what they need. And when I get back to my son telling me that we was poor, and I realized that poverty, as a lot of people, young, old, otherwise, it has to do really on things maybe that you want. And a lot of times, what your needs have nothing to do with what you want, because you really, really, really have been given everything that you will ever need. And if you use the talents that you were given, the talents that you were given help you to access the things that you need. And then if you really do the things that love your neighbor, you are able to share what you have with your neighbor, or what your neighbor has with you, what you have. And so much of it has nothing to do with what you need. It has to do with what you want. And what you want is usually stuff. And I realize when I look at some of my acquaintances, some of my colleagues, and how it has to do with nice clothes, pretty clothes, expensive clothes, lots of stuff. And as my son said to me, "Mama, y'all was not rich. Y'all was poor." Now that's not nice. But you really do realize that definitions have a lot to do with stuff. When I first got started, the one ambition, or the one thing that I had to do, was when I was able, whatever I was doing, I had to go to school. I had to get my degree. I had to be able to take care of myself. And of course, all I had to do was learn to live with that man in the mirror. And that is the biggest thing I think that all of us need to learn to do, is to live with that man, woman in the mirror. Can you look at that person in the mirror and say, I have enough of what I want, not what I need, because I have everything that I need. God has given me and everybody else everything that they will ever need. And now you learn to access it within this world of ours. As we enter all of the stuff that we have, we find out that we have bastardized so much of what we have. And we, as I try to answer the question, what am I leaving? What are we leaving for our children of things that God has given us what we need, and in the way that we have bastardized things and made this wonderful world that God gave us almost uninhabitable, because we have absolutely destroyed so much of what we have. And as we're hearing on the news today, I find myself in some of the classes that I used to have and would argue about, and really be in trouble sometimes, because I questioned, give me you're tired, you're hungry, those longing to be free, and look at what we are doing to the people who are trying to access what this country promises to offer them. And I wonder if sometimes that lady in the harbor wants to drop that torch at her side, because obviously we are still looked upon as the greatest country in the world, but so many of us in that top 2% don't want to share that. And I don't want to call him by name, but former president, the kinds of things that he has been able to say, that he is able to do, that he has been, with which he has been charged, which the people with whom he surrounds himself have been charged. and they get away with it. How? How are they able to do this? How are they allowed to do this? And I don't think there is enough money in the world to make you be able to look at that man in the mirror and say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is why I am here. My cup runneth over, and I have a neighbor who doesn't even have a cup. I have 2 cups, 3 cups, and I don't want to share it with him. How do you justify that? How do you say that that's all right? And as we get to that time of the year called Thanksgiving, and I think back to Mama and my mother probably gave me the greatest gift of all, aside from life, that I was able, or I am able, to look at myself in the mirror and know that I have everything a human being could ever want. I have a family who takes good care of me. And when I get up and look out my window on most mornings, it's bright and sunny. It's not bright and sunny today, but the sun's going to come out eventually. As a matter of fact, the sun is out right now. And according to what I remember in physics, this is the worst kind of weather for sunburn because the sun's not out, but the UV rays come through all of that cloud and what have you, and you get some of the worst sunburns that you ever want to see. But that's neither here nor there. But even so, it's one of the things that you look in the mirror and you say, well, I woke up this morning. I can wiggle my fingers and toes. I'm not hungry. My family takes care of me. I have a wonderful mode of getting around. I have really, really, really wonderful chair. And you wonder, what else is there? There's a lot of stuff, but I don't need any stuff. I have a sense of humor because when you were born into a family of 15, my mother and father had the most wonderful sense of humor, and you had to have a good sense of humor in order to live with that many people in a house. And in order to say, I have everything that I need, I have everything that I want, and I have, you notice you haven't heard my dogs this morning? My dogs are just happy as, what do they call it, a pigs in slop. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Now, what am I going to do for the rest of the day? I am going to read, and that's the other thing that I tell myself, or tell other people all the time when they're talking about all of the awful things that are going on. if you are able to read, you will never have a lonely day in your life. And you really won't. Because if you can read, you can read what's going on. You can read pretend things. You can read about, you can look at the commercials that are on television. And the commercials, oh, that's another story altogether. The commercials, I remember we had an au pair student, and I think the very first week that she was with us, the first thing I remember her saying was, Americans will buy anything. And if she thought that then, she would be flabbergasted if she looked at the commercials now. I now watch televisions and the commercials to see, for want of another better word, how stupid the people who write the commercials think that the people who look at the commercials and buy this stuff. How stupid do they think people are? And guess what? They're pretty stupid. And that's a word that I really, really did not like to use. But for want of a better word, I use it. And right back to, we didn't have any money, but we were never poor. The stuff that you are expected to buy, the stuff, the price is horrible. Now, admittedly, times have changed and the price of things have gone up. But I remember I think in all parts of the country, there are newspapers and ads that come out on either, the best day is either Monday or Thursday, when you get the best deals at the store. I would get up very early in the morning and go to the store so I could get the best of what was being sold. And I can remember one morning I went, there was this wonderful loaf of bread. I got home and I was eating it. So I thought, I hate to go to the store because with all of our kids, we had to go to the store every day. And this was the best bread I'd ever had that I could remember buying. And when I got in line, put my bread on the counter, the lady said, that's $3.50. And I said, no, it's just the loaf of bread, that's mine. She says, that's $3.50. So I moved it a little. This is mine, this loaf of bread right here. The lady says, that's $3.50. And so I picked it up and looked at her and smiled and said, you don't understand. It's just this loaf of bread. And she says, lady, you don't understand. It is $3.50. A loaf of bread. And when I would go into the market, I was going early in the morning to get the low-cost bread because I'd buy a lot of them and put them in the freezer. And that way, whenever I needed the bread. Again, that was another thing. I hated going to the store because I had to go to the store so much when I was a little kid. But the fact that people actually buy stuff like that. And then I remember not too long ago, thinking I would like very much to just get my chair and go down. And this is where the manager said to me, um, "Lady, you don't understand. That loaf of bread is $3.50." And all I could think of was wanting to go into the market and saying, "I'm back," because I am sure that I really gave some of those people the flux, because I never, ever could go through the line when I had not found something that had been mismarked. And of course, this was after the Consumer Protection Act and all of that came along. That is probably the best legislation that we have ever had, consumer protection. But the thing is, I don't think most people pay attention to that. Because, as Evelyn said, Americans will buy anything, and I don't think they question a lot of stuff a lot of times. But I know I'm not the only person who does this now. But because people are careless, the sales clerks, and it's not that they're careless, it's a mistake. And if it's not called to their attention, it's going to be repeated many, many times before somebody like me comes along and gives them the blues. And I'm sure that they thought I was a miserable little lady. I'm the kind of little old lady who gives little old ladies a bad name. And it's too bad. But sometimes it's really the only way. I don't do it anymore because I don't drive anymore. I have to have somebody to drive me places. And the hardest thing, really honestly and truthfully, the hardest thing for me to do is ask somebody to do something for me. And I guess, no, that's not true. It's the hardest thing is that I have to ask someone to do something. Because the funny thing is that most people who will ask you to do something or do something for it, whatever it is, but when you are in a position where you have to ask for help, that's the hardest thing in the world. Because without this chair, I can't do anything. I can't, and even with the chair, I'm no longer able to drive anymore. So many things I can't do for myself. And as time went on, one of the things that improved with me, I improved the way I was able to care for myself. I saved enough to be able to pay someone to do this for me. Consequently, I don't feel like it would feel if I ask someone to do something for me and could not pay them, because it means, and again, that I am beholden to them. And of course, if I can't pay for it today, when will I be able to pay for it? When will I have the wherewithal to pay for And the funny thing is, this morning on one of the programs, and I think it had to do with investing and getting to the point where you engage the services of people who do your investments for you, who do the things that help you make whatever money you have. And one of the things was that again, going back to one morning, and I don't remember what had happened, but I remember, holy Moses, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to have to do this differently because I won't have anything ever. And it had to do with investments. And those of you who are still working, you're having the people come from the investment agencies and talking to the salespeople, or the teachers, or whoever the workers are. And they tell you about savings. And of course, if you pay any attention to it, and it's the kind of thing that when you're younger, you really think about it. And at this right now, if there's somebody who's listening to this who is younger, this is the rantings of an old lady. But somebody who is getting closer to my age might begin understanding that you need to save something, because tomorrow will come. And when tomorrow gets here, if you did not save something for it, it means that you will be beholden to someone else. And all you got to do is read the people who are having problems right now are those people who are on the needs list. And the people who, I've forgotten what they're called, but the people who serve the people who are on the needs list, they frequently are a little bit mean, because it means that they have the power to make somebody kind of beg them for something. That puts you again. We didn't have any money, but we were never poor. And the thing was, it's like, what was it Papa used to say? Like, maybe it wasn't Papa, it might have been my husband. My husband at income tax time would be just miserable. But the thing he always said, I can only be so miserable because having to pay income tax, what's the first thing that means? It means you have a job. And therein lies the tale that puts you in that position. If you have a job, You aren't going to have to ask somebody else for too much. One of the things they used to tease me about at school was that I was not very fashionable. They're not very fashionable now. But someone said you probably have the first quarter that you ever made. And I thought, well, I do have the money that I got at my first Holy Communion. And those of you who make your first Holy Communion know how old you are when you make your first Holy Communion. And if I'm going to be 89 years old, that was a long time ago. And believe it or not, I had a couple quarters that someone had given me when I made my first Holy Communion. And I always think about that. And then I think about when the guys and the ladies, mainly men who came around, talking to the employees about investing. And of course, the people, everybody went to the meetings because it meant that they were going to get a free lunch. And one of the things you learned is there is no free lunch. You got to give something in order to get something. And what you get, in order to get the free lunch, you got to listen to that spiel that they give when you go to that meeting to find out about the investments. And the only thing, again, it's because they're talking to you then, because the time to save is when you're making some money and have a little bit to save. But believe it or not, if you save a little bit at a time and really, 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 really save it, don't spend it when you've spent up everything that you had and you know you've got a few dimes in the drawer. You never do that. You don't spend the few dimes. You never touch the few dimes that you've been putting aside for a rainy day. Because believe it or not, the sun will come out tomorrow. But when it rains, it pours. And right here in Texas, one of the things you find out, when it rains, it pours. And some places in Texas in the last week has been absolutely frightening. Anyhow, now let's get back to the sun will come out tomorrow. Okay, we know that. We've said that. One of the things, it's what is, I remember back when I first started teaching, one day, just as I was getting started, one of the things, believe it or not, young teachers are no worse than anything else that's young. I thought I was the coolest thing in the world. Now, I did not do too many things that were wrong, but as young, you still haven't learned everything you should learn. I learned a lot because I had what Mama taught me. But this particular, I remember saying whatever it was. Everybody who eats peanut butter died. And one of my students went into hysterics. And it was all I could do. Finally, I had the counselor to come over and talk with her and you about, but getting her together and getting me together. And it was me beginning to grow up, because you don't grow up whole. You learn as you walk along the way. And sometimes you learn a lot, and sometimes you don't learn much. And one of the things I remember Mama saying to me, and by this time I was old, and I don't remember what it was I did, but whatever it was, Mama said to me, you have a lot of book learning, but you don't have the sense to pour the contents of a urinal out if it didn't have directions on the side, tilt. Now, of course, it didn't say it like that, but I think those of you who know the adage know what it said. And I always think of that. You don't have the sense to pour out of a boot without directions on the heel. It was true. And all you got to do is look at some of the things that when we're cooking, when we're cleaning, when we're repairing things, how many of you read the directions on that container that says tilt, turn up, take the cover off, put the lid on, don't pour into a pan that's too hot? How many people actually read the instructions on the label? And how many times have you heard the adage, when all else fails, read the directions? And a lot of times that's too late, because number one, you've messed the directions up. You can't do it. So using that as a frame of reference. And since I have really given you an awful lot of extra kinds of things to do today, please know the sun will come out tomorrow. Might come out later on today, but the way it's looking right now, it doesn't look like it will, and it's going to be all right. And it's also cold today. It's in the low 40s. And a lot of people don't think that that's too cold, but all you have to do is think of it. If it's 42 degrees, that's 10 degrees above freezing. So 42 to me isn't cold, but 42 is 10 degrees above freezing. And there we are. And I think, I kind of think we've talked enough today. And I'll be back to talk to you maybe later on today, maybe tomorrow. And thank you for coming into my parlor.